From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning. Happy Monday, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. Great to be with all of y'all this morning. What a great weekend this has been. I mean, an unbelievable weekend. Nasrallah off the battlefield. Most of the Hezbollah leadership now just off the battlefield, and couldn't be happier this morning. We've got a lot to talk about on that end, plus a whole lot more. Join me for a coffee cup cheers. I've got my double espresso. See that beautiful line of foam? That's how you know it's good espresso, by the way. This foam was all the way to the top. Obviously, it kind of comes down the longer the espresso sits, just an FYI. But if you ever order an espresso and it doesn't have that level of foam on it, it's not good. It's going to be bitter. Add a whole bunch of sugar to it, because that's the only way you're going to actually enjoy it without going, ugh, that face. Coffee cup cheers. You can drink that straight. You don't even need sugar for it. All right, let's kick off with a whole bunch of data breaches. And for that, let's give you all this.
There is a security breach.
All right. So the French news agency France Presse, has announced that it's been targeted by a cyber intrusion. The attack affected the company's information systems and disrupted some transmission technologies for clients. It was detected on Friday, right before the weekend. They made the announcement from their headquarters. As of this morning, the identity of the perpetrators and their motives remain unknown, but you can imagine why someone would target a major publication in France. It really doesn't take a lot to understand the motive there. The motive there is twofold. One, it's either to take away the credibility of whatever's left from kind of mainstream media at this point. The other one could be in order to gain access, especially as we get closer to elections. And you can, I mean, the one thing about threat actors is they don't lack good ideas. They don't at all. And so if I'm a CISO at a press agency, there's a few things I'm worried about. One, the integrity of my journalists, right? Like that would be the top one, because your crown jewels is kind of the research stories you're working on, the sources of people that are giving you information, and those types of communication. All of those would be what I would defend as a practitioner. So when someone attacks my organization, that's the first thing I'm worried about. The second thing would be disruption of publication. So is my website still online? Can I still update my content and continue to drive revenue? Because at the end of the day, the more content I push out, the more eyeballs on my website, the more marketing revenue my newspaper makes, and the more subscribers I get to have in my publication. And finally, the third and big one here is obviously reputational damage. So all in all, those are the three things you have to look at. So the temporary disruption that was caused, the agency assured its customers and its global news coverage will continue uninterrupted, meaning this didn't impact our operational side of the house. It likely impacted some sort of IT or back office type of program. Despite some of the temporary disruptions, the French authorities have been alerted and an investigation is underway. Now, the French have been known to kind of get attacked, obviously, primarily by pro-Russian hacktivists or APTs affiliated with the Russian government. We don't know that to be the case here yet. So just kind of keep that in mind. We move on to a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that need to be paid attention to. So first of all, the major Linux vulnerability that everyone kind of thought out to be, really, really serious, and it received a 9.9 CVSS score. This was on Thursday. So we haven't reported this on the show. This was kind of trending all weekend. But we're now coming to the realization that it's really not as bad as it turned out to be. So CVE, the original kind of point here was distributed last week by researchers Simon Margotrelia, who revealed that he would, in less than 2 weeks, disclose the details of an unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability affecting all GNU and Linux systems. He noted the flaw was assigned a CVSS score of 9.9, which led many to believe that it would be a highly critical, high impact issue. And again, this is kind of one of the challenges with bug bounty or kind of like these public disclosure challenges, is sometimes you have these issues. They're not common, but when they do happen, it does tend to create a whole bunch of panic. I was at a roundtable event with many peers on Thursday. When we first saw the news of this come out, everyone's like, oh man, Linux. And, now it turns out that, the 30, 40, 50 minutes we spent talking about this, we could have talked about something that would have been much, much more useful. It turns out that Margaret Trelley discovered several vulnerabilities related to the Open Printing's common Unix printing system, a popular internet printing protocol. Open source printing systems designed mainly for Linux and Unix. 4 cups of vulnerabilities have now been disclosed. Have all been assigned CVEs, all 2024, 47076, 47175, 47176, and 47177. They've been described as an IPP attribute sanitization, command execution, and packet trust issues. It's Monday morning, y'all. So a remote unauthenticated attacker can achieve arbitrary code execution by replacing the IPP URLs with malicious ones. So you've got to chain this together. It's a high complexity attack. It's not something that would be a very easy 0-day. So no need to stress there. Move on. Nvidia, however, for their end, are reporting a critical vulnerability in their container toolkit that impacts all AI applications in the cloud and on-prem environment that rely on its access GPU resources, which is a bunch. The security issue has been assigned to CVE 2024-0132. It would allow an adversary to perform a container escape attack and gain full access to the host system where they can execute commands or exfiltrate sensitive data. And again, we get kind of to this aspect right here where you're seeing particular libraries that come pre-installed with these AI-focused platforms and virtual machines. All of this comes in, and it introduces new risks. And again, everyone talks about proper AI usage, right? Like, I got to secure AI. I've got to limit the data that goes into the training model. Yeah, but there's also hardware and software AI operations that come into play, and that also requires attention. And I think this is where a lot of us have been focused on the data side and not the operation side. I won't say all of us. I've heard these conversations, but not as much. In fact, many of the events I've attended over the last year or so, every panel's like, yeah, well, we're limiting data. We're using AI, but we're using it for these use cases. What are you doing to secure the AI itself? And a lot of times we're defaulting to standard type of protections, which is fine, but you need to put a WAF on every AI command, right? You've got to be able to limit the exposure of the training model. You've got to limit resources, and you've got to tunnel in, and you've got to make sure that when data is exfiltrated and that you've got good sensors monitoring the actions that are happening on the training model. All of those matter when you're looking at using AI. And if you're not using AI, you're going to be out of business. So you have to use AI. And our job as practitioners and as business enablers in cybersecurity is to find from our existing tool stack, if possible, and if not, go find something that will help you gain control and visibility into your AI training model. According to Wiz research, more than 35% of cloud environments are at risk of attacks that could exploit this vulnerability. It's received a critical severity score of 9.0, and if the container escape problem that affects NVIDIA Container Toolkit is 1.16.1 and earlier, and GPU operator 24.6.1 and older, the problem again is lack of secure isolation of the containerized GPU from the host that allows containers to mount sensitive parts of the host file systems or access runtime resources like Unix socket for inter-process communication. Most are a read-only permission. However, some have a Docker sock or a container sock remain writable, which allows direct interaction with the host. And again, that's why it's only 35% and not 100%, but that 35% is significant. A video is available. Again, you can find all of this in our show notes, so go check that out there. The cyber criminal gang tracked as Storm 0501 is targeting hybrid cloud environments in multiple U.S. Organizations and a whole slew of sectors, according to Microsoft. The group is financially motivated. It was using the Sabbath ransomware and attacks against U.S. schools. However, since then, they've been operating as a ransomware as a service affiliate. They've deployed Alpha Phi and Black Cat Hive, Hunters International, Lockbit, and Embargo ransomware families, meaning they've got different affiliates. And again, this is the issue here with decentralized cybercrime. The issue with decentralized cybercrime is an initial access broker, right, that has a whole bunch of access, can essentially go and partner and sell that initial access to different sectors, to different ransomware as a service groups. And he can say to Black Hat, go, here you go. I'll be your affiliate. Give me 30% of whatever you get. And a Lockbit, here you go, do this. An Embargo, here you go, do this. And Hunters, here you go, and do that. And so that same initial access broker is essentially an octopus, and they've got their hands into everything. So while most of the attacks are opportunistic, they are mounting a multi-stage assault to compromise the hybrid cloud environment of multiple U.S. organizations in government, in law enforcement, manufacturing, and transportation. This is the latest threat actor observed to exploit weak credentials and overprivileged accounts to move from organizations to on-premise environment. I often talk about the show that identity is the new perimeter. And if you don't believe me, this is what they're going after. They understand that once they compromise identity, that because we're business enablers as security practitioners, we oftentimes compromise when it comes to identity because of the complexity of managing multiple environments with legacy systems and new systems that don't always mesh. So you have to, as a practitioner, there's a few things you need to do. Manage your identity well. Own identity if you can. Meaning a lot of times we see people own the governance and the policy, but they don't own the execution. And some people will argue against owning the execution of identity. I say you need to own it because your SOC should be able to move faster than anything else. Just keep that in mind. And finally, Progress Software is warning customers to patch multiple critical and high severity vulnerabilities in their WhatsApp Gold network monitoring tool as soon as possible. However, even though it released WhatsApp Gold 24.0.1, which addressed the issue last Friday and published the advisory on Tuesday, the company hasn't provided much details regarding the flaws. So you want to make sure you get this updated ASAP. If you haven't checked out our Substack, please make sure to go and do so right now. jamesazar.substack.com. The article I dropped for this Saturday morning, The Cost of Naivety, How Weak Negotiations Empower Adversaries from Terrorism to Ransomware, how our ability to think that diplomacy will solve some of the world problems, and it's only making them worse, both in geopolitics and cybersecurity. Spent a lot of time writing this one. I urge you to go give it a read. It's supposed to challenge our thought, and I welcome debate on it as well. You can also comment on Substack, and we can start a whole discussion there as well. CISO on Wednesday reiterated a warning against unsophisticated methods that could be used to hack ICS and other operational technology. This happened after a pro-Israel hacktivist group known as Red Evil, or We Red Evils, known to target Hamas, the terror organization, Lebanon, and Hezbollah, its terror organization, and Iran, the main terror state sponsor in the Middle East, compromised water systems that were used by Hezbollah, the Lebanese. They were a paramilitary. They're not a paramilitary. They're a terror organization group, number one, that have occupied Lebanon. And Lebanon now has a chance to regain and become what it was 30 years ago before Hezbollah existed and did what it did in Lebanon. And that's up to the Lebanese people to do so. The war that Israel has is with Hezbollah and not the people of Lebanon. So that's something to keep in mind there. The attackers claim to have received intelligence on the water systems used by Hezbollah for its underground bases in Lebanon. They then took over the supervisory control and data acquisition software, also known as SCADA, with 14 different water facilities in southern Lebanon and Beirut, and managed to change the chlorine level, seemingly that this was another attack, like the pager explosion one, that would have taken more fighters off the battlefield. The claim came less than 2 weeks after the pagers and other communications, and now taking Hassan Nasrallah, one of the most evil terrorists who has American blood on his hands. Hezbollah has killed hundreds of Americans. They were the group that was responsible for the Marine barracks bombing and the U.S. embassy attack in Lebanon back in the early 80s. So Israel took out the revenge and took out a whole bunch of people that were on our most wanted list. So all in all, a job well done there. We'll move to some law enforcement issues here as we wrap up the show. The U.S. on Friday announced charges and sanctions and rewards in response to a recent Iranian hacking operation targeting the upcoming presidential election. So the U.S. Justice Department on Friday announced charges against 3 employees of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps over the attacks, not only against the presidential campaigns, but over current and former U.S. officials, NGOs, and members of the media. If y'all don't know, Iran's been trying to assassinate President Donald Trump and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, since leaving office in 2021, has had security attached to him because of the Iranian threats to assassinate Mike Pompeo. Iran has a huge vested thing in trying to assassinate both President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because of their assassination of Qasem Soleimani, who they took out in a drone strike in Baghdad back in 2020. 3 IRGC employees that were charged were Masoud Jalili, Syed Ali Al-Jamiri, and Yasser Balaghi. All 3 have been charged. Obviously, no extradition here. This is pointless. We're just naming the 3 people that are behind it. NIST is no longer recommending using a mixture of character types in passwords or regularly changing passwords. The second public draft version of its password guidelines, SP 800-63-4, outlines technical requirements as well as recommends best practices for password management and authentication. The latest guideline instruct credential service providers to stop requiring users to set passwords that use specific types of characters or mandating periodic password changes. So they'll say that CSP shall require passwords to be a minimum of 8 characters in length and should require passwords to be a minimum of 15 characters in length. It should allow passwords of a maximum of at least 64 characters, again, moving from password to pass phrases. And they should allow ASC2 and Unicode characters to be included as part of passwords. So all in all, that's the change coming from there. The Department of Justice and SEC also on Friday announced charges against the British national for hacking into the systems of 5 U.S. company. Robert Westbrook, 39, of London, was arrested in the UK and is awaiting extradition to the U.S. to face computer securities and wire fraud charges. According to court documents, between January of 2019 and May of 2020, Westbrook hacked into email accounts of corporate executives of at least 5 U.S. companies by resetting their passwords. So he's awaiting extradition. And finally, Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed the landmark bill aimed at establishing first-in-nation safety measures for large AI models on Sunday. The decision was a major blow to rein in the homegrown industry that's rapidly evolving with little oversight. The bill would have established some of the first regulations on large-scale AI models in the nation and paved the way for it. The Democratic governor told an audience at Dreamforce that the California must lead in regulation of AI, but that the proposal could have a chilling effect on the industry. And so he vetoed the bill altogether. So there's that. That's it for our show this morning. Please make sure to follow, subscribe, and share. We'll be back live this week, 9 a.m. tomorrow and Wednesday. Thursday, there'll be no show. It's Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and so I'll be off. So we'll have only 3 shows this week, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And Thursday, we'll have no show, but we'll be back the following Monday with a whole lot more. So tune in tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, here with all the latest and greatest. Until then, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great week, and most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.